My name is Kathy. And today I'm going to tell you about the moment my family, the ones who were supposed to protect me, betrayed me in the most painful way. It wasn't just any betrayal. No, this was a moment that would change everything. It was at my grandmother's funeral. A day that should have been about remembering her life and honoring her memory. Instead, it felt like a stage. A stage where my family, the very people who should have been there for me, chose to dance on my grief. I was standing there right by the grave, my heart heavy with loss when it happened. My mother, with that smile of hers, cold and calculating, leaned in close, just loud enough for my Aunt Carol and Cousin Mark to hear. "Kathy," she whispered as if the world wasn't watching, "don't you think it's time you moved on from this phase? Grandma would have wanted you to be practical like your sister. Not this." I could feel the sting like a slap across my face. In that moment I realized something that would make everything I'd been through make sense. I was no longer their little girl. No longer the one they loved. I was nothing to them. But little did they know, in that moment something inside me sparked. Something inside me hardened. This wasn't just about my grandmother anymore. It wasn't even about my family. It was about me, what I was about to do to take my life back. What they didn't realize was that this was the moment everything changed. The moment they unknowingly pushed me to become someone I was never supposed to be. Have you ever been treated like you didn't matter? Like the people who should have cared most couldn't even see your worth? I know I'm not alone in this. I want to hear your stories too. Let me know in the comments. Growing up in my family wasn't what I expected. When you're a kid, you believe that family is supposed to be your safe place. But I was always the afterthought. My sister Sarah, she was the one everyone loved. The golden child. The one who could do no wrong. And then there was me, Kathy, the invisible one. I remember one Christmas I was about 12. My parents threw a big party like they always did. Everyone was there. Family, friends, neighbors. It was supposed to be a celebration, but for me it felt like a cruel reminder of what I lacked. My sister opened her present first. A brand new bicycle, shiny and new. She looked so happy, so loved. And then I opened mine. It was a worn-out hand-me-down, a bike that had seen better days, its paint chipped and rusting. I tried to smile, but I could feel the sting in my chest. My parents didn't even notice. Not once did they ask if I liked it, if I was happy. They just moved on, oblivious to how much it hurt. It wasn't just gifts. It was the little things too, the things that made me feel invisible. I remember the school play in high school when I was cast as the lead. I'd worked so hard, rehearsing day and night. I was so proud of myself. And yet, when the big night came, my parents were nowhere to be found. They showed up, but only for Sarah's 10-second cameo. They didn't even bother to watch me. I could feel their absence like a weight on my chest. But I didn't show it. I couldn't. Instead, I kept pretending everything was fine. I kept hoping, praying that maybe one day they'd see me. Maybe one day they'd finally love me like they loved Sarah. And then came the moment that shattered everything. I was accepted into my dream university. I had worked so hard to get there. The scholarship was right in my hands, but they refused to help me. My parents. Instead, they gave the money they had saved up for my education to Sarah so she could launch a new business that would go nowhere. I was devastated. That day something inside me cracked. Not broke, but hardened. It was like all the years of neglect, all the pain I had kept inside me finally turned into something else. I had been invisible for so long, but in that moment I realized something. I wasn't going to be invisible anymore. That moment was the turning point. That was when I stopped being the quiet, overlooked daughter. That was when I decided I wasn't going to be their doormat anymore. I wasn't sure what I was going to do, but I knew one thing for sure. I was done waiting for their approval. I was done asking for love that wasn't coming. It was time for me to do something for myself. But how do you take back everything they've taken from you? How do you get back what they've stolen, your dignity, your worth, your place in this world? Well, that's the journey I'm about to take you on. You won't believe what I did next. That day something inside me cracked. It wasn't a dramatic, tear-filled breakdown. No, it was quieter than that. It was a cold, solid feeling, like the heartache had frozen over into something else. Something hard. Something unbreakable. I don't know how to explain it, but from that moment I wasn't the same person. My family for years had been using me, manipulating me, expecting me to be their emotional punching bag, all while showering Sarah with attention, affection, and resources. I'd spent my whole life chasing after their approval. But that day I realized I'd been chasing the wrong thing. The scholarship money was the final blow. I had poured my heart and soul into my studies, into everything that would get me out of that house, out of that suffocating, toxic environment. But instead of supporting me, they threw my dreams aside like I was nothing. Sarah's new business venture was more important than my future. And I wasn't even worth a conversation, let alone a chance at a better life. I remember standing there, frozen, as my parents congratulated Sarah on her new business plan. They were patting her back, telling her how proud they were. Meanwhile, I stood there with the university rejection letter clutched in my hand, a piece of paper that would determine the course of my life, yet meant nothing to them. My heart pounded in my chest as I looked at my parents, those people who were supposed to be there for me, but instead had just stripped away the last bit of hope I had left. That was it. The moment that broke me. The moment that changed me forever. But here's the thing about breaking. Sometimes when something breaks, it doesn't fall apart. Sometimes it transforms. It hardens into something stronger. I wasn't going to be the same person anymore. I wasn't going to beg for their love or approval. I wasn't going to live in their shadow anymore. From that moment forward, I promised myself one thing. I would never depend on them again. Not for love, not for validation. I would build myself up, and when I finally succeeded, they would know. They would see me. They would all see me. I don't know what gave me the strength to make that decision. Maybe it was the sheer exhaustion of living for their expectations. Maybe it was the unbearable weight of feeling like I didn't matter no matter how hard I tried. But that day I made a vow I was going to show them. Not just for me, but for everyone who had ever been overlooked or dismissed by the people they loved most. I didn't know how I was going to do it yet. But I was done asking for permission. I was done being small. And I wasn't going to let them have the last word. This was just the beginning. And as I look back now, I can see it clearly. The pain of that day was just the spark I needed. Because that's when I started to fight. I wasn't just fighting for a scholarship or for my career. I was fighting for everything they had taken from me. For my dignity. For my worth. And for the life I was about to build. A life where they would never be able to hurt me again. I know you've felt that same frustration, that same anger. Maybe you've been overlooked, or maybe your family has dismissed your dreams. But trust me, if you've ever been through something like that, you're not alone. And I want you to know this. Your story isn't over. Not by a long shot. The first few months after I made that promise to myself were the hardest of my life. It wasn't glamorous, and it sure as hell wasn't easy. But I had a fire inside me now. A fire that nothing, not even my family, could put out. I worked 3 jobs just to make ends meet. Days turned into nights and nights into exhaustion. I remember the smell of instant noodles, the only thing I could afford when I didn't have time to cook. I would sleep on a friend's couch, catching a few hours of rest between shifts, only to get up and do it all over again. My hands were raw from working in retail and my body ached constantly. But I didn't care. I didn't care because every step, every hour of hardship, brought me closer to the life I wanted. But it wasn't just about surviving, it was about growing. I didn't want to just scrape by. I wanted to prove to myself and to them that I could build something more. I dove headfirst into anything that could help me. I spent every spare moment learning new skills. Coding, marketing, business strategies. I didn't have anyone to guide me, but I didn't need them anymore. I found mentors in unexpected places, people who saw my potential and pushed me to be better. There was Mr. Jennings, an old professor I barely knew, who took me under his wing after he saw how hard I worked in his class. He taught me more than just business, he taught me how to build something from nothing. But it wasn't just skills I was learning. I was learning resilience. I was learning that no matter how hard life tried to break me, I was tougher. I would work late into the night, my eyes burning from exhaustion, but there was always something driving me forward. And it wasn't just for me, it was for every single person who'd ever been told they weren't good enough. Every person who'd been left behind, ignored, or discarded. And through it all, my family? They were oblivious. My mom would still call asking if I could babysit for free. My dad would complain that I wasn't spending enough time with the family. Meanwhile, I was out there building something they couldn't even begin to understand. But they didn't see it. They didn't see the long nights, the sweat, or the sacrifices. They just saw me as the same old Kathy. The one who was always there to do their bidding, always willing to put their needs before mine. They had no idea that every rejection, every time they ignored my achievements, was a brick in the foundation of my revenge. They thought I was just a disappointment, a failure, but they were wrong. I was building a life they would one day wish they'd been a part of. I started to see the first signs of my hard work paying off. I landed my first major contract. Nothing huge, but it was enough to make me realize that I was on the right path. I was making real money. I started to invest in my future, learning the ins and outs of financial independence, starting to build a network of people who actually believed in me. Slowly, very slowly, I began to feel like I was finally in control of my life. But the hardest part was still ahead. I was starting to gain power, and that meant my family was going to take notice. They always did. They had a way of showing up at the worst moments, pretending to care when they wanted something from me. I knew what was coming, and I wasn't going to fall for it this time. Not again. And that's when I started to plan. I didn't need to be loud about it. I didn't need to make a scene. No, my plan was much quieter than that. I was going to let them continue to believe that I was still that girl, the one they could ignore, the one who didn't matter. And when the time was right, when I was ready, I would show them just how wrong they were. I would show them everything they'd missed. I was building something they could never take away. A life that didn't depend on their approval. A life where I was the one calling the shots. I didn't know exactly how it would unfold, but I knew one thing for sure. When the time came, my success wouldn't just be a personal victory. It would be my revenge. And it would be the sweetest kind. The months turned into years, and with every passing day, I got closer to the life I'd always wanted. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was thriving. The grind, the sacrifices, they had all been worth it. I landed my first big contract. Something that pushed me into the business world in a way I never thought possible. The check was more money than I had ever seen in my life, but it wasn't about the money. It was about the feeling of validation, the satisfaction of knowing I had earned it all on my own. No family handouts, no favors. Just me, my skills, and the sweat of my labor. I used that money to reinvest in myself. I took courses, hired mentors, and built a network of people who truly saw my potential. There were nights I stayed up late, studying strategies, reading books, pushing myself further than I ever had before. But it was paying off. Slowly but surely, I was becoming a force to be reckoned with in my industry. I was respected. I was making a name for myself. And then came the moment that made everything real. I launched my own company. It wasn't much at first, just a small operation, but it was mine. I was the one calling the shots. And slowly my business started to grow. I made connections with powerful people. People who didn't see me as a failure as my family had. These were people who believed in me, who supported my vision, who helped me grow. My mentor, Mr. Jennings, he was still there, always reminding me to keep pushing, to never settle. And I listened. I listened because for the first time in my life I felt like I belonged. Meanwhile, my family, they had no idea. They had no idea that while they continued to live their lives expecting me to bend over backwards for them, I was out there building an empire. I would hear from them, of course, usually when they needed something. Kathy, could you help with a small loan? Or, Kathy, we need you to come visit. We miss you. But they never once asked about my work, my dreams, my success. No. They were still too caught up in their own lives to notice mine. It's almost funny now looking back. They were so used to me being the one who needed them. The one who would show up, do favors, and ask for nothing in return. They never took the time to look at what I was building. They didn't see me at all. But I wasn't angry. Not anymore. As I was about to show them. I had all the power I needed. I had the success. I had the respect. And soon I would have the last laugh. I didn't need their approval anymore. I had proven everything I set out to prove, and I wasn't finished yet. I knew that the time would come when my family would see me for who I had become, not who they thought I was. But I wasn't going to be the one to tell them. No, I was going to let them figure it out on their own. I wasn't going to shove my success in their faces. I wasn't going to beg them for recognition. Oh, I was going to wait. I was going to bide my time and watch as they continued to dismiss me, oblivious to the fact that I was about to make their worst mistake look like a blessing. Every phone call they made asking for a favor, every time they pretended to care, those were the moments I stored in my mind. Every time they asked for my help, I knew exactly what I was doing. I was waiting. I was building. And when the time came, they wouldn't just see my success. They would realize the power I had over their lives. They didn't understand yet. But they would. And here's the thing about power. You don't have to flaunt it. You don't have to make noise about it. Sometimes you just let it grow quietly underneath the surface until it's so big, so undeniable that when it finally does surface, it's too late for anyone to stop it. I was becoming that force. The force that they'd ignored, underestimated, and dismissed for so long. It wouldn't be long now. Soon they would see exactly who I had become. And when they did, when they finally realized that I was the one they'd turned their backs on, that would be the sweetest revenge. The day had finally come. I could feel it in the air like the calm before a storm. Everything I had worked for, everything I had sacrificed was leading to this moment. I had built myself into someone they could never ignore. My company, Kathy, last name Enterprises, was thriving, my network was stronger than ever, and my reputation? It was solid. People respected me. I was someone now. And my family? They had no idea. They were still too caught up in their own world to notice the magnitude of my success. But today they would see. Today they would realize exactly who I had become. And I would make sure it was in front of everyone they respected. It happened at a family gathering. Just a typical Sunday dinner. My parents, my siblings, and all the usual suspects. They were chatting and laughing, completely oblivious to the fact that I had orchestrated the perfect moment for my reveal. My mother was sitting at the head of the table as always, regally holding court with the family. My father was trying to impress everyone with stories of his business ventures that never seemed to pan out. And Sarah, my golden child, was prattling on about her latest idea, one that would surely flop like all her previous attempts. But I wasn't paying attention to any of them. Not anymore. I had waited for this moment. For years I had waited, and now it was time to let them see who I had become. And I wasn't going to shout it from the rooftops. No. I was going to let them figure it out on their own, just like I had done all these years. Quietly, with precision. The conversation was going on as usual, with my family completely ignoring me as I sat there, calm, collected, and ready for what was about to unfold. Then my phone buzzed. A text from one of my partners. It was time. I stood up slowly and excused myself from the table. Everyone looked up, probably expecting me to grab my coat and leave early like I always did. But today was different. Today I wasn't leaving. I walked to the other room where I had arranged for my business partners to meet me. I had a few important investors in the room, and in just a few moments the announcement would be made. I took a deep breath. I wasn't nervous. I didn't need to be. I had earned this moment, and I knew it was time to take what was mine. The room went quiet as I clicked the button. I smiled as I saw the announcement appear on the screen for my family to read. Breaking news. Kathy, the CEO of Kathy Enterprises, is now the proud owner of this family business. I watched as my mother's face shifted from smug contentment to confusion. My father's proud, almost overbearing expression dropped, and Sarah, my sweet sister, looked like she'd seen a ghost. The silence in the room was deafening. They all stared at the screen, reading the news over and over again as if they couldn't believe what they were seeing. And then it hit them. I could see it in their eyes. The realization that they had underestimated me, dismissed me, and ignored me for far too long. My mother's smile, the one she always wore so carefully, cracked. She looked at me, her eyes darting nervously, trying to make sense of it. My father, the man who had always thought I was a failure, his face turned pale as if he'd been struck. Oh, Sarah. The golden child. She looked like she was about to cry. But I didn't feel sorry for her. Not anymore. I didn't have to say a word. The message had been delivered. They had all seen it now, who I had become and how I had made them all irrelevant. My success, my independence, it was something they could never take away from me. And the best part? I didn't need their validation anymore. I had built this empire on my own without any help from them, and I was the one holding the keys. But the best part? The best part was yet to come. I wasn't going to rub it in their faces. I wasn't going to act like the arrogant person they always thought I was. No. I stood there, calm and collected, letting the weight of my success sink in. I had waited for this moment for so long, and now it was theirs to realize. My parents, who had always treated me like I didn't matter, were now the ones who would have to come to terms with the fact that they had been wrong about me. And my sister, the one who had always been the shining star? Well, she had just seen that her world wasn't the only one that existed. I was the one who had the power now. And they couldn't ignore me any longer. The silence that followed my reveal was almost unbearable. For a few long seconds no one said anything. My parents just stared at the screen, their mouths hanging open in disbelief. Sarah, the golden child, looked like someone had just pulled the rug out from under her. And in that moment I realized something. This was more than just a power shift. This was the beginning of the end for how my family saw me. My mother, trying to regain control of the situation, cleared her throat, offering a forced smile. "Kathy," she began, but her voice trailed off. She didn't know what to say. No words could fix what had just been exposed. The walls they'd built to keep me in my place had crumbled. My father, ever the businessman, was the next to speak. This is just business," he said, trying to mask his surprise with an attempt at nonchalance. "It's nothing personal." Nothing personal? That's what he had always said, always treated me like a business transaction. But now, as they realized the truth, they couldn't hide from it. They couldn't pretend anymore that I was the same little girl they could dismiss. Sarah, in her usual fashion, tried to salvage something. "Kathy, you know we've always wanted the best for you." Her voice quivered, but I wasn't moved. Her words were empty, the same rehearsed lines I'd heard 1,000 times before. They weren't sincere. Not anymore. I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. My success spoke for itself. Their desperate attempts to apologize, to act like they cared, didn't fool me anymore. The hurt they caused me couldn't be wiped away with a few weak excuses or half-hearted apologies. They tried to apologize, of course. My father called me the next day asking if we could talk. My mother sent me a message, pleading for forgiveness. They both claimed they didn't know how much their actions had affected me. But I wasn't buying it anymore. I wasn't going to let them manipulate me back into their world of neglect. I was done being the afterthought, the one they only called when they needed something. So I made it clear. My boundaries were set. "I'm happy with where I am," I told them, my voice calm but firm. "I have a life now. A life I built on my own. If you want to be a part of it, you'll need to start treating me like I matter, not just when it's convenient for you." Their apologies rang hollow, tainted with desperation, not remorse. I simply smiled, a genuine, peaceful smile, and stated, "My door is open to those who truly respect me. It's always been open. You just never bothered to walk through it." That was the moment the power truly shifted. I wasn't begging for their approval anymore. I wasn't the broken little girl who needed to be loved by them. No, now I was the one in control. I had rebuilt myself from nothing, and now they had to come to terms with the fact that I didn't need them. Some of my other family members, the ones who had stayed quiet all this time, began to see the difference too. My cousins, who had always watched from the sidelines, started to distance themselves from the ones who had betrayed me. And my uncle, who had always admired my drive, reached out, offering his support, no strings attached. It felt good to know that, despite everything, I had found people who truly valued me. I don't need them anymore. Not like I did before. And as I stood there, surrounded by the life I had created, I realized something important. Blood isn't always thicker than water. I had found my own family. People who had supported me not because of some obligation but because they saw my worth. They respected me, and that was more than enough. And as for my family, they would have to live with the fact that they had let me slip through their fingers. They would have to carry the weight of their own mistakes. Me? Well, I would continue to rise, no longer burdened by their negativity or their expectations. As I had learned something over the years. The greatest revenge isn't proving them wrong. It's living your life on your own terms with your head held high. And that's exactly what I was doing. My story isn't just about revenge. It's about finding your worth when no one else will. It's about standing tall in the face of everything that tries to tear you down. And for anyone out there who's been told they weren't good enough, who's been neglected or betrayed by the people who should have loved them most, this is your reminder. Your worth isn't defined by anyone else. Sinew always has been. And when the time is right, you'll show them exactly what you're made of. So here we are. You've heard my story. You've seen the betrayal, the pain, the struggle. You've watched as I rose from nothing, determined to prove that I was worth something. But now, after everything I've been through, I want to leave you with something important. Something that goes beyond my revenge. You see, the real victory wasn't about getting back at my family. It wasn't about proving them wrong. The real victory was in me finally believing in myself. In taking my power back and deciding that I would no longer let anyone else define my worth. That was the turning point. The moment I decided that I didn't need their validation, their approval, or their love to succeed. I know it's not easy. We all have those moments when we feel overlooked, when we feel like the people closest to us can't see our potential, can't see our worth. But let me tell you something. Your value doesn't depend on anyone else. Sinew right now. It's always been there, waiting for you to realize it. My family. They'll have to live with the fact that they failed to see me for who I truly was. They'll have to live with the regret of never having supported me when I needed it most. But that's their burden, not mine. And it's not yours either. The truth is, we're all capable of more than we think. The pain, the hurt, the betrayals, they don't define us. What defines us is what we do with them. You don't have to be a victim. You don't have to let your past control you. What you do today, what you build today, shapes the person you will become tomorrow. I turn my pain into purpose, and you can too. Whatever you're going through, whatever you've been through, remember, you are worth so much more than what others have said or done. Your journey isn't over yet. It's just beginning. So to everyone watching this, I want you to take this message with you. Don't wait for anyone else to tell you you're worthy. Don't wait for approval. Don't wait for them to see your worth. Show them. Live your truth. Build your life. Because when you do, no one can ever take it from you. If you've been overlooked, betrayed, or pushed aside, remember this. You have the power to rise. And when you do, you'll be unstoppable. Don't let anyone, not even your family, define who you are or what you can achieve. Thank you for watching my story. If you felt inspired, if you found strength in what I've shared, I want you to share it with someone who needs to hear it. Like, subscribe, and leave your thoughts in the comments below. I want to hear your stories too. Because together we can remind each other that we are stronger than we think. Our worth isn't up for debate. It's already in us.